Hello, everybody. Doc Hydro here. Listen, it is currently January 10th, 2021. Now, one of the things that I want to do is I want to introduce a concept today, and that concept is called the fire bridge. Now, the reason I'm calling it the fire bridge is because what do we typically do? We think of bridges as a way to cross from one point to another. The other thing is that a bridge allows us to connect 2 points that are relative to one another for a common cause. That's why I'm going to call it a fire bridge. So for those that are familiar with my Wildland Apparatus Engineer's quick reference booklet, in here on page 19, I have examples of BTU per cubic foot of a cord of wood. I use cords of wood for models for BTU examples. And the reason I do that because it's typically what people are used to during the off season. They purchase firewood. If they got wood stoves, they purchase firewood, or if they got a pellet stove, they're looking for the really good pellets or the really good wood. The reason for that is because heat content. So it was intuitive for me. It made perfect sense for me to use cordwood and the BTU components of wood as the model to carry the concept. That's all it is, just carrying the concept. So in the booklet, you can download this from my website, or you can get this from my website at wildfireengineer.com. So here's the nomogram from S490. So if we look at this, and I was on the Wildfire Learning Portal, and I was looking at this and following along with the guys doing it on that classroom, and I thought this is kind of an interesting concept. And the reason I got stuck into looking at this was because that individual that I'd worked with, who's now down in Arizona, she had told me, you know, Joe, you might want to look at this because I think this is what you're looking for and how to bridge the gap. That's where fire bridge came from, because we always talk back and forth about how do we bridge the gap? How do we relate BTU and fire out there, what we're seeing, to gallons per minute or hour or load or whatever you want to call it. How do we connect the operation side from the planning side and make it to where they can work together? That was the idea. I'm looking at a nomogram here that you guys are seeing now, and I'm going, yes, because now I think we have something critical that has been there since the 70s, that we've always had, always known, always been able to look at, but nobody's been able to tie the two together. We just look at fire intensity out there on the wildland fire ground, like what you see here, and say, yep, there she goes. And you know, we always keep going, we need bigger, we need bigger, we need bigger. Well, that's not doing it. Well, God, well, what else can we get? This is what I see. Now, obviously, I'm paraphrasing, but you get the point. We typically tend to do that. So this is where I just arbitrarily, just for explanatory purposes, put the cross at. So you can see right here, we're looking at about a fire line intensity in BTUs per second per foot of about 2,150. But you can come down here and look at this and go, well, that puts it at about 500 BTU per square foot. Or you can come over here and go, we've got about 229 as what I estimate it to be chains per hour. Okay. So now, this is where the next model is that I'm wanting to do something with, because if we look at the fuel model 4, which is what we were just at, I think it was fuel model 2, but I say fuel model 4, but it's supposed to be fuel model 2. Once you finish your nomogram, then you're able to derive the information. The information that you derive is the flame lengths, which was in the top portion of that nomogram, and then the fire intensity in BTU per foot per second, and then the rate of spread in chains per hour, which can be broken down into feet per hour, and then you could derive the speed in miles per hour if you wanted to. And then you got the heat per unit area in BTU per square foot. And look at certain data elements of each of those, and then rearrange them. A lot of times we already have what we need setting on fire. We just don't rearrange them to fit the right spot. So hopefully I can tie that in with this video here. So again, we use the rate of spread the most for planning and determining where the fire will be at the end of the operational period or within the next hour or a couple of hours. It just depends on who's on the fire and what they intend to do with the data. So although we're given other critical pieces of information, it's seldom used, okay? Like the BTU per second per foot. I've talked to several folks that they were taught that you get the fire line intensity to get an idea what your fire's doing, but then once you get that number in BTU per second per foot, you don't really do anything with it. How would the BTU per foot per second help you as a planner to determine what you need to suppress it? Because the number one thing that everybody always says is they pull that trigger. Once again, they pull that trigger and they get a hold of a VLAT or LATs or seats or helicopters or all the above, and they just throw the world at it and hope for the best. Well, so here's where we go. So in the fuel model, we have in the red circle estimated BTU per second per foot, and it's showing around 2,150 BTU, okay? The rate of spread, 229 chains per hour, or that could be 15,114 feet per hour. If you divide that by 60 seconds, a minute, you get 252 feet per minute. That's how fast that thing's moving. So think about that. The BTU per foot per second is 2150 times 60 seconds. That's an enormous amount of heat, okay, or 4.2 feet per second. So if you take the 2150 and divide it by the rate of spread in feet per second, you'll end up with 512 BTU per square foot. That nearly matches, okay, let me go back to the picture here. That pretty much, that just about matches. So take the 2150 here, divide it by, so you take the 2,150 BTU per foot per second, divide it by the equivalent rate of spread in feet per second, because this unit over here on the right is in feet per second. So you have to use a corresponding element. You either have to multiply this 2150 by 60 to get BTU per minute, or you have to divide the rate of spread by 60 to get the rate of spread in feet per second. So that's what we done. So it matches on the bottom of about 512 BTU per square foot. Okay, so now that we've got that, so remember that. So we've got that. So getting back to our usefulness here. So if you look at the fire over here, so picture that and imagine that this is this fire that we're looking at here on that nomogram. So the nomogram, this is what we're seeing. Let's say it's the same fuel model, okay? So in the example, if we have 2,150 BTUs per second per foot, and we divide that by 4.198, again, that's going too precise. We don't need to, so you could do it 4.2, but you get the rate of spread in breaking it up in the rate of spread of 4.2 feet per second, you get 512 BTU per square foot. Okay. Now, if you take that 512 BTU per square foot and multiply it by the rate of spread in feet per second, you get the 2,150. So that matches up there. So now, how does this equate? And now we're gonna construct that bridge and show you how this could work or should work in the actual field. Okay. So if our fire line is a 1/4 mile long, 1,320 feet, and it's 4 feet wide, then the instant BTU would look like this. 1,320 times 4 feet, okay? That's your area. You got 5,280 square feet, okay? So you multiply that by your BTU per foot per second, okay? Because remember, we got 1,320 feet long, but it's moving 4 feet, okay, every second. And then another 4 feet, and then another 4 feet, then another 4 feet. So that's why you do that and multiply it by the 2150 to get 11,352,000 BTU per second. Or if you multiply that by 60, you get 681,120,000 BTU per minute. Okay, so now this is where we're going to show you where this gets in a little bit more useful. So now that we've got the total BTU, now we can figure out what we can do, okay? That I also want to help construct this bridge, this fire bridge, is if you want a fire to go out, fires produce BTU. Water absorbs BTU. The idea as to why you look at certain fires to where a helicopter will come by and they'll drop a load of water on it, and it will completely knock down the active flame. That's what you want. If you knock out the active flame and can keep it knocked out long enough for another one to come in and drop retardant on it, you can now encapsulate that with a burn inhibitor. Ideally, I would think that it would be good that if you could get in, drop it right down the center with the bulk of a concentrated load, like a precision drop, cool as much of that air as you can, take the punch out of it, and then use it like a timed event, folks. And then, so if you've got a C-130 or an MD-87, and then you can follow that up, even if it's just a seat. Let's say you got one of these 3,000-gallon tanker jobs. They're coming in with a full load of water. They knock the flame front out. They got some steam, and then here comes a seat or two right behind it and drops retardant. Cool it, retard it, dose it. That's the idea. So now, how to determine with this, the last thing I want to finish up with here, guys, is if you have your fire and it's producing all this BTU, okay? So the example is like what's on page 20 of my book. If you've got a fire that's producing a lot of BTU, you want to have an idea as to how much water it's going to take so that you know whether you can do it in one drop or 2, 3, or 4 drops, or if you have to start segmenting and prioritizing your active fire line. That's the idea here. This method is going to give you the tool that you need to be able to do that. So take the total number of BTU. So here I've got 96 million, but substitute that with 681 million. And then we had 1,123. So if we again go back to the calculator and say that we got 681,120,000 divided by 1123, then that means that we need 606,518 pounds of water. No problem. Now divide that number by 8.34, which is the pounds per gallon, and you need 72,000 gallons of water. So if you know that you've got 3,000-gallon aircraft, okay, divide that by 3,000, you would have to have 24 loads worth. So that 24 doesn't have to be one airplane. But if you've got 4 or 5 planes, each plane makes like 6 loads. There you go. On that, my philosophy is to basically cool it, retard it, then dose it. The idea is take the punch out of it. You're still going to have heat in there, a lot of it. But if you can take the initial punch out of that by knocking down the flame front, this is what the structural world does. Then come in and drop retardant on it. That's your burn inhibitor. So cool it. So get the knockdown, put a burn inhibitor on it. That will allow you to buy time for your crews, your shot crews, your dozer crews to come in and go to work. If you have any questions with this, or you want to pick my brain more about this, feel free to give me a chat. Send me an email at hydro@wildfireengineer.com. You can also, like I said, you can get my booklet off the website. And I'm also on Instagram, YouTube. I'm everywhere. We'll see you later, guys. Bye-bye.